This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Rock and Roll Denim, Pendleton Whiskey, Bill Fick Ford, the WCRA, and Resistol. Born in the iconic American western town of Pendleton, Oregon, and taking its name from one of the most revered rodeos in the world, my absolute favorite rodeo, known for the grass, the Pendleton Roundup. Pendleton whiskey is a modern celebration of a century-old tradition. Pendleton whiskey is barrel-aged in American oak and cut with glacier-fed spring water from Oregon's Mount Hood for an uncommonly smooth, rich taste and complex flavor. The Pendleton whiskey brand honors a heritage that inspires us to live boldly, never lose sight of the values we believe in, and taste the moment, wherever we may be. The legacy of the American cowboy is forged in every single bottle. A taste of true Western tradition is always worth raising a glass to. Discover more at pendletonwhiskey.com. Oh, and Pendleton Whiskey is the official whiskey of Pro Rodeo and of the PBR. Pendleton Blended Canadian Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume, Pendleton Distilleries, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Please drink responsibly. Bill Fick Ford, the number one Super Duty dealer in the entire country, is still taking care of their customers. It's hard to get trucks right now, but there's some perks when you're the number one Super Duty dealer in the country. You still got trucks. Go to BillFickFordHuntsville.com to get the no bull discounts that no one else is giving during this crazy time that we're living in. Bill Fick Ford is still the place to go. In fact, if you ask me, it's the only place to get a new Super Duty dealer today. Bill Fick Ford. You can win $1 million by nominating your rides, runs, and all your funds in rodeo by earning points with the WCRA. Through the WCRA Triple Crown of Rodeo, they will award a $1 million cash prize to any one athlete or collection of athletes who win first place at any 3 consecutive WCRA major rodeos. $1 million is up for grabs, guys. Don't miss it. WCRA's final leg of the 2021 Triple Crown of Rodeo will take place at the historic Cowtown Coliseum in where else but Fort Worth, Texas, December 15th through the 18th. The WCRA Cowtown Christmas Championship Rodeo will have no entry fees and will pay more than $360,000 with $40,000 guaranteed per discipline. Use promo code GAUGE10 for 10% off your next nomination. Again, that's GAUGE10. Guys, use it. To learn more, just visit WCRArodeo.com and learn how you can earn a spot at the Cowboy Christmas Championship and possibly be Rodeo's next millionaire.
What sets Resistol apart is the legacy of the cowboys who wear the brand. These traditions are passed down from fathers to sons, from heroes to future champions. Since 1927, Resistol has been handcrafting the finest American-made cowboy hats. Generation after generation, we live it every day.
This is The Gauge with host Chance Conradu.
Are you freaking serious? It's Conrado. This is The Gauge, and I am Chance Conrado. On this episode of the podcast, we have got Jess Pryles. I'm just going to go on record and say this is probably my favorite non-rodeo podcast we've done because, frankly, I'm a huge foodie, beef, steak, all that stuff. Clearly, if you listen to this, you know that's my jam. And, you know, she speaks that language, and I learned a lot from her. She challenged me on some of the preconceived notions I had, and if you're not following her on Instagram, you're really stupid. She is a bad bitch. Go follow her on Instagram and check the episode out. Gotta hide this. I'm not a Starbucks supporter. I was in a bind. It's like, I really need caffeine. There's nothing else around.
I've had the worst luck in the past week. I drink coffee every morning,
Really?
and for whatever reason, my teeth for the first time ever have been hurting and sensitive, like all of them.
Because of the heat, maybe, or
I don't know if I've been grinding in the middle of the night or whatever, but I haven't been able to drink coffee. It's sort of been hurting them.
what
And
about
so
like
I
an
feel
iced
like
coffee or cold coffee?
Desperately decaffeinated, uncaffeinated. I don't
You need
do
a
the
Red
sweet
Bull?
stuff.
We could give you a Red Bull. You can see if that hurts your teeth. I won't tell anybody.
No, I'm hanging in there. I'm hoping that one day it just comes back, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was never a problem to begin with.
I always thought, because you hear, like, depending on what you like listen to as far as health and fitness and all those things and what rabbit holes you go down as far as that, you hear a lot of people say, well, don't drink coffee, don't consume caffeine because it's actually worse for your mood and all that.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how you could live that way.
I know.
Or the come down from that. It's like, I don't want to think of caffeine as a drug. I don't think anybody does, but I'm kind of as a drug.
I get it. And trust me,
stay on that drug.
I'm also just like a black coffee, like make the pot in the morning.
Really?
And go 2 to 3 cups during the day.
Hit that pot.
Yeah,
every
so
few
this
hours.
is why it's been
that's
really
what I do.
very eye-opening week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wake up like grouchy, tired.
Yeah.
Like
Where's
bite
my
your husband's
face?
head off kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
get out of my face first thing in the morning.
That happens anyway, but yeah,
Oh, wow.
sure.
Yeah. How long have you been married? Because I think this is marriage.
We've been married about 2 years.
So that's fresh.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much. Like, depending on how long you were together before the marriage, maybe.
Yeah. Not that, about a year. So
Oh,
it's
so
still,
the whole thing is like right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so you're in like maybe last stage of the honeymoon phase?
No.
You're past that.
Yeah.
It ended quick.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say it ended quickly. It's just we're older too, so it's sort of like
I don't know. It depends on what your definition of older is. I'm going to either feel really good or really bad based on your answer. You don't have to answer.
No, you can go first.
No, I don't think I
No,
want
that's
to.
fine. No, you can.
I just hit a pinnacle birthday a couple months ago. Yeah.
What's that?
3-0. Yeah.
How old are you again, Chance?
Well, I just said that time. I'm not going to repeat it for you. We can count your age on our hands.
Yeah. That's like 30 is like still an infant basically. So you're fine.
Oh, well, thank you.
We're over 40. So we don't the honeymoon period ended quickly because it was like we're tired and we have real life problems to worry about. So like love you, but also I'm going to sleep.
Yeah.
You know?
Love you, but if you snore, I will kill you kind of thing.
Yeah.
That sounds like life.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get the rundown on exactly what your thing is, and Riley briefed me in, and it seems like we have a lot of similar ideals about food and things like that, which is why she reached out to you. She's like, oh, she's like him. Yeah. So if you can give me the rundown on who you are and kind of what your thing is, and then maybe we can get into some pretty interesting conversations.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Do you want like a formal introduction?
I mean, I don't know what your definition of formal is. We're pretty informal around here.
I mean, do you want me to say my name
Absolutely.
and like hey, I am this person? Or
Yeah,
are we
absolutely.
just doing it like, hey,
I mean,
this is
I'll
what I'm
say
about?
it in an intro, but
Okay.
I also want to hear you say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Jess Pryles. I have a weird accent because I'm originally from Australia, but I've been living in Texas for about 6 years, and it goes back and forth between the two of them. And apparently that's a real problem for people. Like, people love to talk about my accent on social media a lot. So
That's weird.
I thought I'd
Usually
just get it out
people
of the
like
way.
Australian accents.
Yeah, but I have a weird, it's a half-half. It's a hybrid accent. So they're like, why did she say some words weird? That's what they like to talk about. But, so my deal is basically, I'm a meat expert. I'm a live fire cook. I am a current graduate student doing a program of meat science at Iowa State University. I have a company called Hardcore Carnivore, and we do like seasonings and grill accessories, and basically we call them products for serious meat enthusiasts. And all of it started because of a visit to Texas over a decade ago, where I tasted barbecue for the first time, fell in love with it, wanted to eat more of it, and then wanted to know how it was made. And in discovering how barbecue was made, I'd figured out a lot of stuff. Like, I was the type of person who would order a steak out, but I was never very confident to buy one from the grocery store, know what I was buying, know which cut to buy, know how to cook it. So much conflicting information. You know, do you do 7 minutes each side? Do you flip it constantly? Do you not touch it? Do you do cast iron? Do you know, all of this stuff to do with a pretty expensive protein. And in learning more about barbecue, I unlocked a lot of secrets to just meat cooking in general, and just became completely fascinated and fell down the rabbit hole. So in trying to figure out why the brisket that I attempted to buy in Australia looked nothing like the ones I'd seen in Texas, it led me down this path of understanding cattle breeds and the age of cattle and cuts, and how butchery is different in different countries. And I mean, I'm from Melbourne, so that's a city of now 5 million people.
Yeah, second biggest, right?
Yes, just behind Sydney. And, you know, it's extremely urban. It's like, and it's hard to compare it, I think, to Texas, because here, even if you're from a big city like Dallas or Fort Worth or Houston, you probably have pretty good relationship to something in agriculture. Like, you probably know someone who has a ranch. You probably know someone who's got cattle. You know, Future Farmers movement's huge around here. So you can, Future Farmers, sorry. So there's much more of a relationship. I grew up not knowing anything about it, like being totally disconnected in a very urban city. And so I came to it later in life. And so when I was sharing what I was learning with people through my website and through my social media, it was really resonating with people because a lot of other folks are in the same position of like, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. This has helped me in my kitchen. And then, I put the pedal all the way to the metal and sort of, it really became an obsession. And I visited ranches and slaughterhouses and meat universities, Texas A&M. I've done a lot of stuff with them. And as I said, now I've gone to the point where I'm actually going back to school for it. So it's definitely my passion, and I really enjoy kind of talking about everything from the raw product and the meat science factor to, helping people myth bust and problem solve in their own kitchen.
Yeah.
Or smoker.
So that's really interesting because, it's all based on it's not necessarily, when you say carnivore, it's not from like the health and wellness side. It's more from like the cooking and consuming side.
Right. So
Yeah.
we actually came up with the brand name. I came up with the brand name prior to the rise of the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that happened, because I also have a cookbook called Hardcore Carnivore, which I just thought was a super jazzy name for
That's
someone who's
very-
into meat, right?
Very much so.
Yeah. So this weird thing happened that the diet became popular afterwards. And even though it doesn't say like anywhere on our marketing or anywhere on the cookbook that it is for the carnivore diet, like a lot of folks do get confused about that and sort of make an assumption and then go, potatoes aren't in the carnivore diet. I'm like, yeah, neither is the entire seasoning line. So I think it's neat to be able to cater to that market, but it sometimes it's a little frustrating that people just make assumptions sometimes because it's like, hey, we
Yeah.
were around first. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be misleading.
Yeah, well, you have so many like pivotal people discussing that aspect of it, and it's kind of a new thing. But I share a similar passion with cooking, and it's one of those like nerd out moments with what we normally talk about. It's not the normal thing, but a lot of people, especially in our kind of sphere of consumers, it's like a main staple. Like if you look at farmers, ranchers, all that, it's like the number one thing you find on most people's plate when you go to those places to eat, or even your own, if you came from that background, it's going to be a steak or a hamburger or something of that nature. Because when you say ranching, 99.9% of people, their ranching product is cattle.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's really interesting. And as far as everything you were just talking about being enamored with it, I could see how coming to like Fort Worth would do that. But so what's your favorite barbecue place here?
Panther City Barbecue, I think, is incredible.
Really?
Yeah. I wish it was closer. I live in Austin now, and
Yeah.
but I've actually done some really cool stuff with the crew at Visit Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
We produced a video series about 2 years ago now, and we traced that link between Fort Worth and beef. Because I think that there's a huge resurgence of popularity with the Texas barbecue. There's these new schools. Like back in the day in Fort Worth, you had a couple barbecue joints at the stockyards and maybe a couple others too, and they weren't. There's a very big gap. Let me put it this way: there's a very big gap between the old school places and the new school places.
Huge.
And it's really the new school places that are helping to perpetuate the popularity of this new school of barbecue, like the obsession over the Texas Monthly Top 50 list and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, explain that a little bit, the Texas Top 50 list. People are probably not going to know what that is.
Sure. So Texas Monthly puts out a list every 4 years, and they have done for a while, of the top 50 barbecue joints in Texas. And probably 2 lists ago, the last list just came out a couple of weeks ago. But 2 cycles ago, it started to really gain momentum because it was when the inklings of like Franklin barbecue and just that bigger movement of barbecue was starting. Obviously, I understand barbecue has always been and will always be popular in Texas. We're not trying to say that the wheel got reinvented or anything, but there was this new school popping up. The difference being they're not serving food out of a steam tray. They're kind of having more of a chef approach, right? Or maybe you even you in your backyard. They're not going to serve it unless they're real happy with it, and it's
Right.
more of a craft. So they're hands-on. It's sold out. It's not just
Right. They're not trying to just push people at the lunch rush.
exactly. So now people are obsessed with this Texas Monthly Top 50 list because it sort of serves as a guidebook to the type of places that you should eat in Texas. And most of the old traditional joints have fallen off the top 50 for the reasons that I've chatted about.
Yeah, like Hard Eight's probably not on the top 50, right?
But the Hard Eight...
The Roanoke Hard Eight.
Okay, I don't know about that one.
Have you been to that one? It's the original one? That's the one. The rest of them, not the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not even that far from here. I just happen to live there.
Okay.
So it's like, that's where you go. It's like an old homestead building because it's like this cultural Main Street area. Like if you look at the sign driving down 35 Roanoke, it's the food capital of Texas. They've got the original Hard Eight there.
Okay.
It's the best Hard Eight.
All right, good to know.
Yeah.
The number one place on the list is actually in Fort Worth. Well, it's outside of Fort Worth too, which is called Goldie's Barbecue, and that's pretty new too. Panther City landed on there in the top 10 too. A couple others in town made top 50. But what's really cool with this resurgence is there's so much barbecue tourism happening. Like there's a lot of Australians coming over for it. There's a lot of people coming in from other states for it. And Fort Worth is lucky because it can tell a very, very unique story because it has the original... It has the origins of beef in Texas and how it got to be a thing. And it's incredible to come to the stockyards, like people, sort of dismiss it as a tourist thing. But to go and to get to see the old Swift building and understand like why Swift Armor had a building there and that both these companies still exist and are still big players in the meat industry. It's super cool to connect that, and it also tells the story of why brisket became king in Texas. So that's really
Do you know
unique.
that story? Can you tell us that story?
So basically, one of the things is with the decimation of the bison here in Texas, they created grazing land by removing those animals. So that's when they started to bring cattle in. And they had room and they had pasture in Texas. And they didn't have that on the East Coast. And that's why there's much more hog and pork on the East Coast. And historically, and even now, brisket's a super tough cut. And barbecue historically was a way to get rid of the tougher secondary cuts.
Yeah, it breaks down the sinew and the connective tissue.
Exactly. So... a lot of the German immigrants, because obviously Central Texas has a lot of German Czech immigrants, would apply the smokehouse techniques because they were often the ones running the meat markets of what they learned in the old country to these tougher cuts, and they started to offer ready to eat foods as well as raw meats. And that's why you still see barbecue historically sold by the pound and just on a tray with some butcher's paper like that, because that's how it originated.
Sure.
But because of the number of cattle in Texas compared to anywhere else, that's why we're so beef heavy, obviously. And in fact, we're due south of Kansas City. We used to ship all of the goodnight trails, all of the cattle trails used to go up to Kansas City, and that's why Kansas City is the only other place historically that has brisket on their barbecue menu. None of the famous kind of North Carolina doesn't, South Carolina doesn't, Georgia doesn't, Kentucky doesn't.
It's all pulled pork and things like that.
Or whole hog, yeah. So, and for the record, I will say that the Kansas City version of brisket is pretty terrible. So
yeah, Kansas City's not. I mean, like a strip steak, if you go to the right place, is great. But yeah, as far as barbecue, I don't know of anywhere else you can really like your idea of barbecue. If you're from like a Colorado type place, it's like a Dickey's barbecue that's popped up in some mildly small town, right? And you're like, oh, this is what barbecue is. It tastes like shit.
Well, and that's why there's this big disconnect, because there's actually like, even in places like Colorado, even in places like Brooklyn, there are barbecue joints opening up that are doing it in this new school style that we find here in Texas now, like that brisket with that really pronounced bark, which is what we call that crust on the outside with the salt and pepper.
It's the best part.
Yeah. And so a lot of that historically regional barbecue has now been, you can find it anywhere. So it's not as regional as it used to be.
Right. Yeah, I find it really like kind of interesting because, I mean, everybody's got their shtick. Everybody's got a nook or a cranny or whatever they can crawl into and like find purpose and meaning. And as weird as that sounds, I phrased that really weird. I just made you really uncomfortable. I shouldn't have said nook and cranny.
So I'm not uncomfortable. You just don't project on me.
Hey, I'm sorry. Like, I said it. It made me uncomfortable, and then you were comfortable with it. Well, now I'm questioning you. And it's like, I think we should talk
Chance,
about
we get it. You're uncomfortable.
No, I'm just kidding. But it's amazing that there's like science is based around this, and that you can get a degree in these type of things, and that you can almost base your whole identity around it. You have a successful Instagram account, you have a successful book, and it's just really, it's really cool that you could sit down with somebody and have such an in-depth conversation about like one of the biggest aspects of human life, which is eating, right? Like for all of human history, that's like been the number one driving factor for virtually everything, is consuming food and being able to like sit down and enjoy it with people. And I think it's interesting that that's kind of what you decided to make your life into. And then of course barbecue's top 5 best foods ever, so
yeah,
it
right.
makes sense.
I know, and it's very communal, and it's something that, you know, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but it's true. It's a love language for a lot of people, right? So being able to cook a really comforting dish for people that you care about and show them kind of how you care about them through your food, especially food like barbecue that takes so much manual labor. You know, when we're done the traditional way, you're talking about these offset pits that are all just run just with wood. Everything has to be monitored constantly because you're just using the vents to control the temperature. The meat's a natural product. It's never going to cook the same way twice. Have to check each piece by hand. And, you know, a lot of people want an instant, easy recipe, and you don't cook meat really, well, barbecue, to temperature. It's ready when it's ready. Steaks you can cook to temperature, but there's no magic number, you know, and it's going to change every time. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of labor that goes into
steak culture and barbecue culture are so different, though. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that. I guess you could do both, right? Like you can like both, but like you can cook a ribeye if you cook it the right way, like let's say on a cast iron, in like 8 minutes, and it tastes great if you do it right.
But what's your version of doing it right?
For me personally, so I nerd out on steaks, always have. And so my favorite way to do it is in like a Le Creuset cast iron. And it's got to be at least a 1-inch thick ribeye. I'm one of those people who prefer grass-fed. I didn't used to. I used to think it tasted weird. But then I started, because I got more health conscious, you know, transferring over to grass-fed, and now that's what I like. So I go to one place to get them, and anyway, like it's not cheap to eat them, but it's worth it if you know how to cook them right. And that's how I like to do it personally.
So are you just X amount per side? Do you constantly flip them?
Nope. So yeah. So no flip. So let's say it's a ribeye. So whatever that thickness is what I would determine it on, but it's always high heat. It's always like, I use like a beef tallow now. I used to use coconut oil, but then I found out maybe, you know, that's not the best. So now I use beef tallow and you know, granulated butter. When I said I nerd down on it, for like a normal person who's not a scientist in it like you are, like I got deep because I wanted to make sure I knew how to do it right. Yeah. And so that's how I do it. I use the cast iron, but then I'll also put it on, I'll smoke a ribeye sometimes, or I'll use, what are those? I have one, I got stuck into it. So I got one of the high heat, what are those things called? I can't even remember the name of it. I don't use it that much, but it's that contraption, puts like 1200 degrees from both sides, and it's like what the steakhouses use. Yeah. It's a pain in the butt.
We call it, so the kitchen word for those, I mean, there's a lot of brand names, but they're called it's a salamander. So it's like a really intense high heat, like 1400 degree gas flame on the top. So that's how they like finish mac and cheese and stuff like that in the restaurants. They'll just like broil the crap out of the top of it.
Yeah, broiler.
It's effectively a super high heat broiler. But the funny thing about all this as well, because like I have, you know, different methods as well, but food is very personal. So in the same way as really the only two foods that you're given a choice on how they're cooked in a restaurant are eggs and steak. Yeah. You know, everything else is you're not going to tell the chef how wilted you want your greens, you know, or how grilled you want your asparagus or whatever. So, or how, and there's just one way that fish can be cooked really, or should be cooked. So it's really interesting. And there were so many debates about, you know, and shaming people who like well done and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I'm personally a huge preacher of this method that I call just keep flipping. And it literally is the idea of moving that steak and keeping it moving constantly. The one consistency that you have to have is that high heat. And a lot of people in their kitchens, they have these really weak burners, you know, like a lot of the stoves don't, it's certainly not the same as a restaurant that has huge gas BTUs. or they don't want to set their smoke detectors off, so they're not even letting the pan preheat enough. They're not letting it get hot enough. It'll never get hot enough. They don't want to set the smoke detectors off. And then when you put that steak in, it immediately cools the pan down, and you don't have that ferocity of heat to heat it back up again. And that's the main reason that people struggle to get a steakhouse result at home.
Right.
But whether it's in I also really like using stainless steel now for steaks. I have some cast iron pans that I swear by, like, beautiful old vintage skillets and modern skillets too. But the stainless steel or carbon steel heats much faster, and it can reheat much faster if you drop the temp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which helps. But even on a grill, like, I'll pile all my coals to one side to really concentrate the heat. And the idea basically is this. When you brown the surface of a steak, it's called the Maillard reaction, which is the reducing enzymes and amino acids caramelize this crust, and it creates new compounds. And it's the same compound as when bread starts to bake and brown in the oven and smells amazing. Same thing. So you're getting a lot of taste, flavor, and scent compounds built with the Maillard. That's why it's really important to build on, because it will change the flavor of your steak. But Maillard doesn't happen when there's a lot of moisture. So the moisture has to reduce, and then that change can start to happen. So I always pat my steaks dry before I sear them. That helps because you're immediately removing that surface moisture too. But even if you keep flipping it on a hot, dry pan, you're going to start to continue to dry out that surface. And as that steak cooks, you will develop a crust for sure, as long as your heat's high enough. Because that steak is drying out, the Maillard reaction is happening. But most importantly, and this is kind of really cool, you will not overcook the steak on any one side. So you can actually get like that coast to coast perfect. If you like medium rare, it'll be medium rare the whole way through, without having to have that gray band on either side.
Right.
And for some folks, like, you may have perfected it in your kitchen to the point where you can do that single sear and still have a really good result, because you know, when you're using tallow as well, anytime you introduce oil like that and you're getting that quasi fried motion, it's that same Maillard reaction, we're getting those brown compounds building from that fried process.
Right.
So you can get there quicker, which means also you're lowering that risk of overcooking too. But reverse sear is another steak cooking method that's become really popular in the last couple of years, and I'm kind of preaching JKF to kind of get people to move away from that. So the idea of reverse sear.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Do you know how it works?
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, I don't prefer that method at all. Yeah, what I started doing, and see if you think it's the right thing, is what I do is I salt them the night before, put them in the fridge, and then take them out, and then they're pretty dry. Or at least it seems like it. Someone on YouTube said to do that, so that's where I got it.
It's called dry brining. So, and I guess, but see, this is what's so funny and so peculiar about cooking, right? If there's someone who's thinking about doing what we're talking about, you have to mention specifically that you salt them, but then you put them back on a rack in the fridge uncovered. Yep. Because if you salt them and put them back in a bag or in a Ziploc or whatever, you're just gonna pull all the moisture out of the meat, because salt does that as a reductant, and then it'll just hang around in the bag, and you'll have a ton of protein and water in the bag the next day. But if you do what you're saying and let it dry out, you get this hyper dry surface to be able to have a really different sear. It really does help.
It does, yeah. And so you said something, and just because, like, I'm a student of literally everything, and it's for damn sure you know way more about this than me, so I need to capture what I can from you while you're here. Go for it. Because my love language, it's food. So, but actually, I like to cook it, because, like, I don't trust people to cook it. My wife and her parents, they're not food people. And I've been around them forever, and it's like they're the type of people who will buy those little thin things from Walmart and toss them in the oven. It's like, we're having steak tonight, and like, that's not steak.
No, you're having jerky.
No, that's a boot. That's the sole of a boot. But you said to not use oil in the pan, or at least you said dry pan, and that's how you think the best way to do it is no oil in the pan of any kind.
You don't. I mean, 100% when I'm grilling, I never use any oil. It depends a little bit on the cut. So we've been talking so far today about ribeyes, and ribeyes have enough fat in them for two reasons. One, even if you're buying grass-fed and it's a leaner cut, those little rivets of fat that you see in steaks, it's called intramuscular marbling. And that's related to grades like prime and choice and select. Prime will have the most marbling in it, and that's part of what makes it prime. But a ribeye in particular is actually several muscles in one, whereas Kansas City strip or New York strip is just one muscle.
Right.
It's actually the same muscle as what's in a ribeye, by the way.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you look at a porterhouse, right, that's a strip on one side and a fillet on the other, right?
Yeah. So that strip is called the LD muscle. That's a backstrap. It's the same as a deer backstrap. It's the same as a pork loin. It's all the same muscle, and on the four-legged animals, it runs the whole way down. But where you split the animal at the forequarter and the hindquarter, that's where it becomes ribeyes at the front and strip steaks at the back. But because that ribeye has that, and it has at least one or two other muscles, the complexus and the spinalis, there's going to be a big seam of fat running in between those. So the second that you get that ribeye in that pan, it can start to, as long as that pan's super hot, it'll start to render down and basically self-baste. So you don't actually need oil.
So do you add butter at the end and baste it at all, or is that how you just salt, pepper maybe, and you let the steak cook in its own fat on both sides?
Well, I'll use Hardcore Carnivore seasonings.
Well, naturally, and we will certainly be doing the same.
But I don't. I've done butter basting. I've got a video on it on my YouTube. But do you know the main ingredient in butter?
Is it ghee? I don't know.
In actual, like a stick of butter.
Like not a like grass raised one ingredient.
Any butter, whether
No.
it's grass or whatever.
No.
The main ingredient is water.
Really?
Yes. So butters will have between 20 and 25% fat in them.
Really?
And the rest is water. And so when we talked about how important it is to keep your steaks dry, and when we talk about introducing something with so much moisture into it and you've butter basted a steak before, right?
Yeah, all of these scenarios, I always use butter at the end.
So tell me if you find that this happens. Do you ever find that when you start to butter baste, even if you're getting like a nice foam on it and you're using a spoon to go back over the top, that by the time it hits your plate, any kind of like firm crust has been taken away because it's been softened by the butter?
Yeah, probably. Now I'm thinking about it.
And so this is where it's personal choice again, right? Because yes, the butter adds a ton of flavor. I would argue that if you're getting really nice beef, especially grass-fed beef, you know, there's enough of a unique flavor in there, and the butter can actually hide the uniqueness of the beef tallow flavor. I mean, no one's ever going to complain about adding butter to anything, let's be honest, right? But for me, I really like a really aggressive crust.
Sure.
And butter undoes that because of the
That's
water
interesting.
content. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to try this next time. Of course, I
Okay.
have this tragic thing going on right now. This is probably, if this happened to you, based on what you like, it's probably ruined your life too. But so I had COVID like in July, and I lost my sense of smell.
Oh, God.
And I got super lucky. I didn't lose my sense of taste. Still don't have my sense of smell. Out of nowhere, my taste just changed in the last few weeks. And steak tastes like petroleum jelly now.
Oh, that sucks.
It really does suck.
That's
it's
horrible.
jacked my whole life up.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough, and fingers crossed, knock on wood, haven't contracted COVID yet, mainly because, you know, with everything else that's going on, that was the thing that scared the shit out of me. Like, my whole career is based on me being able to taste and smell things. So that was one I was being really, really cautious about. So, but yeah, that would be tragic. And there's that
real
other,
thing.
like that Lone Star tick that you can get that makes you stop eating red meat if you get bit by it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It's
I hope I
horrible.
don't run into one of those.
That's what I'm saying.
Are they only in Texas?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about wild game, by the way? Because you mentioned backstrap, and
I feel great about it.
you like it?
Yeah. I should have some in my freezer next week if I'm successful next
Same.
weekend.
Yeah, I'm heading to Missouri on a deer hunt on Wednesday. But
Yeah.
I have a harder time with like venison than like elk maybe or beef. Elk's really easy because it relates similar. It's just really lean. But deer, for some reason, it's really hard to find a great way to cook it that's not like in a sauce, or unless it's backstrap, different story. But every
Yeah.
other cut, I might have a struggle with deer. You have good tips on deer? How to make it not taste like sagebrush?
I mean, whitetail shouldn't taste like sagebrush.
No, I'm from
really eating
Colorado,
it.
so mule
gonna
deer
say,
is
yeah.
just not that great.
Yeah, and that's part of the that's that. Well, so how about you look at this in an interesting way, which
Yeah.
is showing you how interesting and the effect that the animal's feed has on the way it tastes.
Yeah.
There's some of the most famous pork in the world, like Iberico hams, are animals that run around in acorn fields, and that flavors the meat. It's really, really incredible. Unfortunately, sagebrush isn't a great flavor.
But I think that's why whitetail tastes so good, is because they basically eat what cows eat. They're eating corn and sweet feeds and these things that the farmers are putting out to grow the deer. Whereas a wild mule deer that's up in the Rocky Mountains in like Craig, Colorado, they're not eating delicious things.
And that's funny. It's funny as well. Like, I'm a hunter, I'm a meat advocate, and I don't like when anyone in the industry kind of tries to come after each other, because I think with the threat of, the fake proteins right now, which are highly processed,
Impossible burgers and
things of that nature, that everyone needs to sort of be fighting the same fight together. So, like, I always find it funny when hunters are like, "Oh, I know where my meat comes from. It's organic." It's like, actually, you know nothing about where your meat comes from. You don't know if that animal was sick. You don't know if it was injured. You don't know what it was eating. You don't know if it was domestic enough. Obviously in some situations they won't be near any other human life. But what if they did get into someone's field that has used pesticide? Now it's not an organic animal anymore.
Well, and you're so right. Yeah.
But so that, and I think people should feel good about hunting, and I think they should be good about, like, I process all my own deer myself, but it just doesn't have to be a holier than thou experience, because I think even the domestic, like, slaughter system has huge traceability, because it has to. Like, the USDA system has a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that we're all safe and eating safe meat,
right?
And with CWD being the way it is and things like that, like, and seeing some people, like, just seeing how people handle their venison, that I won't eat other people's venison.
It's really gross.
Dove season is another big one for me. So when I go dove hunting, it's I take a cooler with me into the field, or I fill my.
So let those birds sit out all day.
The second that it's down on the ground, it's on ice.
Yep.
Because the idea of, and so I did this at my friend's ranch a couple of weeks ago, and he looked at me like I was insane, because he's been hunting in Texas all his life and not jacking with the ice thing, and I'm running like a crazy person putting them on ice the whole time. And we finished the hunt and we came in to clean the birds, and he starts cleaning them. I'm like, "Can you smell that?" And he takes a whiff. He goes, "Yeah, it's just the dove whiff, it's a little whiffy." And I'm like, "Cool, smell my birds." That sounds weird.
Smell my birds.
Smell my birds.
In podcast. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole episode.
Yeah.
Smell my birds.
So
go check out.
He goes ahead and sniffs the bird, and he's like, "I don't smell anything." I'm like, "Exactly, because yours has been rotting for the past 3 hours, and mine has been chilled."
September in Texas.
Yeah, in 90-degree weather. So how do you think that's not going to affect the taste of the meat?
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah. Then a whole nother thing, right? Because you're so right. I have so many, like, hunting friends that are, like, way up in the industry and things like that, who do it for a living and are like, they're those people. And not all of them, but there's just, you're right, there's this holier than thou thing. And it's like, if you're hunting whitetail deer and you're growing them on your place, and your whole big thing is that you're eating wild, even if, like, okay, I've got big time waterfowl hunting friends. I'm like, I'm sorry, but if you're eating ducks and geese, you don't get to claim that you're just eating wild. Yes, it's a wild animal, but they are eating processed corn from Canada down to Mexico. Yeah, that's all they eat.
Yeah,
they're not eating anything wild. They're not eating like a historically accurate,
like ancient
diet.
grains.
Yeah, they're not. They're not sitting there eating, like, because if you shoot a duck or something from a weird place, maybe where they're not eating all these processed foods, they taste like shit. A farm duck tastes great, but a wild duck is not that different, because from Canada all the way down, they're eating rice, they're eating corn, they're eating millet, they're eating things like that. That's no different than what a chicken is eating, really.
Yeah, and it also depends how much work that animal does. So, like, domesticated cattle compared to how much deer move, that's why the meat on wild game is darker,
right?
And why it can taste more gamey. There's a lot of different reasons that venison can taste super gamey. A lot, but and there are some amazing hunters, like, if you hear people like Remy Warren, and they're legit, like, they will trek out 4 days into the backcountry. And
Adam Greentree, your fellow Australian,
there you go.
Yeah, he's really cool too.
And they'll do that, and that's super respectful. But I think it's fine to eat wild game or domesticated animals. So
yeah, I don't think it matters. It's just putting that like dogmatic line in between, as if you shot a deer in Kansas, like that. You're not.
Well, there's a guy who has a podcast that's pretty popular out of Austin that you might have heard of. I probably don't need to say his name. He hunts a lot of elk, and he shits on factory farming when it's convenient, and then also talks about other breeds when it's convenient, and then also like expects that he can live in Texas and fly into Colorado and shoot an elk and then fly that meat back home, and that somehow that's going to be sustainable. To suggest that everyone should be.
He's probably
part of that
worth
lifestyle?
like $300 million. Came from LA, really funny comedian.
Someone like that.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But the point is, the narrative that he is talking about with the hashtag I eat elk is not something that most people in the United States can afford.
No. Yeah. So if you're going to pay, and I know a lot about this because I have family in Colorado in that same area where he goes, and anybody who wants to hunt trophy elk, you're going to, in Colorado, you're going to a very specific area, at least as far as the really high dollar area that you can go and you can get landowner tags to get these big bulls. Like if you pay just as a regular civilian to do that, like regular people money, not $100 million Spotify money, it's $10,000 to $12,000 to $14,000 for that one bull elk, right? If you're going to the best prime locations, and you got to wait years to be able to get in there. So yeah, it's not
Unless you pay for it.
Well, unless you pay extra or you're someone wildly famous. But even if you pay for it, there's waiting lists to get into these things, right? Like it's not.
How much do you think it costs to ship?
Hunting.
How much do you think it costs to ship that meat back to Texas?
It's $2,500
yeah.
or more. Yeah, it's really we've done it, and it's really expensive. Yeah. But it's not a normal thing. And like, let's say you live, and I'm just speaking about Colorado. I know listeners, we know you're from Colorado. We're 120 episodes in, they know. But it's really good because that's one of the hubs in this country for elk hunting. And to be able to even get close to be able to have a similar experience to that, you got to spend 20 years collecting points, not using them, maybe getting lucky in the draw, doing all that. But your regular people don't. They have no relation to like what he talks about when you get these great elks. And you get the photos and all that, and that's the benefit of being famous. And it's still, he says good things, and it's really cool because he's bringing a light to the industry, and it makes people interested in it. But yeah, there's no way that anybody can relate to any of that.
But like he's gone on record on his Instagram before and said factory farming shit, and then within the month posted about certified Piedmontese beef, which is which is a domesticated breed. It's actually a really interesting breed. They're a double muscled animal. So the idea is that you've got twice the protein or twice the muscle strands, but lower fat. But the tenderness is there because the connective tissue isn't. So from
That's interesting.
CrossFit, like a lot of health carnivore people are getting into that breed. And it is interesting for sure, but you don't
like the hypocrisy.
I do not like hypocrisy.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, so what is your exact belief on, like, so we're talking about this, but you haven't said what you think exactly, other than you don't like the hypocrisy. So, like, what do you think would be the best approach for someone like that to, bring his ideas to market or
I'd be
not
fine.
be a
If he was
hypocrite?
just talking about elk, that's fine. It's only when he said fuck factory farming that one time. It's like, no, dude, you can't do that. You can celebrate elk and you can talk about like the access that you have to that. That's fine, but you can't do it at the expense of something else. So what do I think about it? I think that it'd be really cool, and the industry's making drives to becoming more regenerative and sustainable, which is really important, I think, for any part of life, and any decent rancher will tell you about how important sustainability is. I think there's still a dichotomy between sustainability and quality of food. There's that endless question of, if you're a chef and you're in it for the food, not the locavore aspect, and your job is to try and make the tastiest dish possible, and tomatoes that are coming out of Maine are tastier than Texas tomatoes because we don't have the right soil, crop, heritage, whatever it is.
It's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
So do you use the imported tomatoes, or are you supposed to just use what you have hyper-local, even if they're inferior ingredients?
Right.
Can you use non-seasonal ingredients, et cetera, et cetera? And then, there's also a broader conversation about, like, how do we re-educate people the cost of 20 chicken nuggets for $1? Like, what actually goes into that? it's not like there's anything wrong with the meat. Like that's not what I'm questioning here, but it's devaluing the labor that's associated with that, because we've sort of turned food into this into a giant industry, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so there's a lot of different stuff at play here, and that's why there's no real simple answer, I think.
How do you think you attack it though to make strides to change that? Like, if you're calling the shots, right? Let's say you all of a sudden are appointed to head of food in the entire world, and you get to make these decisions and guide not just our country, but let's just do our country, because there's so many other things going on in the rest of the world that would change all this. But in the United States, if you could change the way everything we're discussing is done to be what you would find the most beneficial, how would you do that?
I don't know that I can answer that. And the reason is that I haven't done any sustainability studies into what that model would look like, because quite sadly, I just don't think it's that linear. So I've never sat down and said, well, if I could do it this way, because there's so much that needs to change. But I think, like, being put on the spot, the answer would be I would try and change the way that especially with fast food, that we've devalued the value of meat.
Sure.
Because that, I think, has a lot to do with why we're consuming so much of it, and then that puts a lot of pressure on the system as well. Yeah,
no, it makes a lot of sense. And from that same standpoint, like, we're talking a lot about ranchers, but one thing we haven't talked about is like the factory farmed cattle, like the feedlot cows. And there's obviously a clear health difference between that because of the antibiotics they're consuming in the diets. But I mean, do you have I
disagree with you.
Yeah. And so these are things I don't know. I'm asking questions, actually. Yeah. I'm not making grandiose statements because that would be really ignorant. I'm trying to learn, but like, do you think, and I guess from like a protein and a nutrition standpoint, like if you compare, because I've done this, like just from like peer reviewed research that's been done, like you compare a grain-fed, grain-finished steak to a grass-fed, grass-finished. Grass-fed is almost more of a buzzword than anything, because they're not that different as from a health and wellness standpoint. There's not much difference as far as like the omega-3 fats. It's small percentages, right?
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. There is a difference in the type of fats, and the, from a nutritional standpoint, the grass-fed fats are healthier for you. But as you exactly said, when you look at the overall percentage, can that make an impact? It's like saying this, right? Like you're looking at cured meats, and uncured bacon is still cured. They use natural nitrates, which occur in vegetables, right? But when you look at the whole number, when you're looking at it like a whole, it just becomes a moot point. Like, salt is toxic. We eat it every day because we're probably never going to eat it in the quantities that are going to provide toxicity to us.
Right.
So all that's an important part of it too. So I've been to a lot of feedlots because I wanted to see these answers for myself. I think the main thing the caveat over everything is in any industry, there are bad eggs, whether it's the guy at McDonald's who spits in your burger and then that video goes viral, that doesn't mean that the majority of McDonald's burgers have spit in them, right? It means that someone was having a real bad day and got caught on camera. The way that we have domesticated these cattle, they're nothing like the aurochs, which is the ancient animals that they were derived from. Yeah. Exactly. So we're dealing with a whole new beast, and we're dealing with a whole new strain, and we're dealing with an animal that we have taught to digest things like grain. We know how it fattens them. And in a feedlot, there's usually hypernutrition. Like, they blend the food to make sure the animal gets exactly what they need. So it's not just that they're putting them in a trough and like throwing a whole lot of stuff in there. It's that it's a balanced diet of what that animal needs. There has been hormone use in animals historically. There are lots of moves to walk away from that. As far as antibiotics are concerned, in most cases, because of it's all about expense. At the end of the day, it's a commodity, right? So farmers don't want to give animals antibiotics unnecessarily
because of the cost associated with the antibiotics,
right? And if there's nothing wrong with them, why would they do that? It's a waste of money for the rancher, and then they're trying to get them into the pens to administer these. It's a pain in the ass.
It's really hard, yeah. If you grew up on a ranch, it sucks.
Yeah, right. There's also USDA regulations. So every meat processing plant in the United States has a USDA inspector. So not every piece of meat in the US needs to be graded. That's optional for quality grade. But every piece of meat needs to be inspected. And you don't get, as the guy who owns that plant, you don't get a say. USDA is sending a guy in. He's third party. He's usually not very friendly with anyone else at the plant because he's there to do a job and be hypercritical. So they inspect all the carcasses that come off the line. USDA also mandates that antibiotics need to leave the system before the animal is sent to slaughter. So much the same as if you get an infection and have to take a course of antibiotics, you're still going to get an infection in 2 years' time. The antibiotics have left your system. It's not, you're going to have to take a new course.
Sure.
And I think there's a huge mistrust in what people think goes into their beef because of marketing, because of some bad people in the industry, who were doing the wrong thing, but also just because we're just taught to be really skeptical, like there's got to be something really,
that makes sense,
nefarious about it, but there's not. Like you walk into a feedlot and people say, oh, all the animals are shoved in close together. Well, how many ranches have you driven by in a pen full of animals that are all free and they're all standing together in the same corner?
Yeah.
Because they're a
Absolutely.
herd animal.
That's
That's how
do.
it works. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things, and this is just stuff that I've come to on my own. I'm not sponsored or employed by any agricultural services. I wasn't grown up. I didn't grow up with any of this. I wasn't raised with it all. They were answers that I wanted for myself. And I guess to some extent I was really surprised because I thought it was going to be this really nasty industry, and it's not. So
I think it's really good for people to hear that, because you said the key word, which is marketing, and it's, I guess, what maybe people don't think, because they get so attached to an ideal. And I will admit it myself. I got really attached to the idea of grass-fed beef because you have a few people who are almost doing like a reverse marketing to attack the other side. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, you would think, well, no, grass-fed beef, they're open range. Like that's the Jesus Christ version of steak right there. Right. And you can buy into that. I certainly have.
yeah.
And what you're saying is like kind of making me think a little bit like maybe, it's reverse marketing. Right.
Well, it is, because the problem is that there are 3-4 main companies that control most of the beef in the world, right? And it's really hard for a small rancher or a smallholder to come up against that. So they have to use whatever tools they have, and usually that tool is the health argument, or they're striking fear with the know where your meat comes from, right? When I buy a piece of meat at the grocery store, I can tell you which plant it came from because there are systems and checks and balances in place. There's an app you can get. When you buy a vacuum sealed brisket, it'll say inspected and the plant number, and you can see exactly which plant that animal was processed in.
Sure.
It is transparent. The way that farming and ranching, cattle ranching in America works as well, we can't trace it all the way back to the beginning because cow-calf operations sell off to like either feedlots or put cattle on agistment. So there's you can never trace it all the way back because that's not how the system works. And it doesn't really matter anyway. But I think that I've seen a lot as well. Someone was like telling me, I'm doing some research on going to New Mexico for the first time. And someone was like, oh yeah, you've got to try this local butcher while you're here. And they sent me their website, and I opened their website. And the first thing that I see is our meat is healthier than others.
A lot of the butcher shops say that. Yeah.
So, and now my question is, qualify that. Mm-hmm. Tell me how it's healthier. And in 99% of cases, they can't. The only argument you can potentially make, which we've already touched upon, is that the type of fats that are in grass-fed are healthier. But again, that's a moot point when you look at the quantity consumed.
It's so amazing to look at that, right? Because like if you look at and you have to look at the right studies and know how to get your hands on those. But if you can, and you do, and you look at a full-on peer-reviewed funded study at a university where they're comparing a grass-fed ribeye to a grain-fed, grade-finished ribeye. Mm-hmm. The grass-fed has 2% more protein, right? And it has like a 6.5% higher omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Mm-hmm. But if you take that percentage and you like a 1 pound ribeye, the amount of that is so minuscule compared to everything else that you're ingesting that it can't even tilt the scales over like a 20, 30 year period to where it could even make any difference. And we're also learning more about HDL and LDL cholesterols and the myths that maybe are associated with those, and how red meat does not do anything to your body that you think it does. Yep. And so if you're looking at it and then you go to, we'll say like a butcher shop like that I would go to, and you pay triple the price for that ribeye versus the, frankly, like that same ribeye they've got versus like a Nolan Ryan Prime at like a Kroger, right? Mm-hmm. It's literally triple the cost.
It's also, and I have to say it, this is the key, it is not going to taste as good. And the reason that I can say that is, unless, and you are one of the rare people who really likes the taste of grass-fed beef, it's
been an acquired taste, though, because I thought I needed to for a health standpoint. And it's really funny. It's because it comes from that whole carnivore thing. Like, I read a book called The Carnivore Code. For sure you know about it, right?
I don't, because I don't give a shit about the carnivore diet.
That's great. No, yeah, that's great, because it's a freaking, it's a little incestual, dogmatic group of people who are the same as a vegan.
So I eat because I enjoy food and it's my love language. It's not a diet for me. And part of that as well is just straight up, I was talking about that tomato example, right? Of do you use the best one you can get, or do you have to use local because it's local, right? And it does play into the sustainability argument. But in this case, what makes grass-fed healthier is it is lower fat. What makes it lower fat is it doesn't have physically as much fat in it. And fat, we know that fat is what carries the flavor in meat. They've done studies where they've taken a really like lean beef cut like an eye of round, and they've microscopically removed as much fat as possible, and then they've ground that meat with other fats. So they'll take the beef ground with pork fat, the beef ground with lamb fat, the beef ground with beef fat, and whatever animal it was ground with, that's what the meat, it'll taste like ground lamb. It'll taste like ground pork. That is how significant fat is in determining flavor. So when you want that really lovely mouth coaty feel, like beefy, steaky, I mean, you're cooking in tallow because tallow is rendered beef fat. It's the beef version of lard. That's what's making your steak taste so good. So if you're going to eat on a diet for that purpose, that's fine, but you're eating very differently to why other people eat. The other big thing is when you're talking about a lot of these small ranchers, cattle genetics are very expensive. When we talk about genetics, we're talking about like how much that cattle is going to yield, what it's going to marble. Historically in the United States, prime grade beef was around 2% of everything harvested. It's up to nearly 10% now because people have worked so well on genetics that we're hitting the golden age of beef right now in the US. 80% of the beef is choice. You can't even find that much select beef if you wanted to, right? Because we're just churning out this great stuff.
So the quality, even at the lowest level that you'll probably find in a supermarket, is better than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Just at the starting point.
And a meat science has a lot to do with that because they've figured out the packaging, like how can we best make it shelf stable? How can we keep it fresher? How can we tenderize it? Do we need to age it? Does it need to hang before that? When an animal dies and goes through rigor, it's basically a permanent state of contraction. So any time you hear people talking about wet aging, dry aging, any of that, it's trying to undo that rigor.
The death molecule, basically, yeah.
You're trying to break the bonds that can start to let that muscle like relax. And so when you're talking about a small rancher who maybe has 6 head of cattle, and goes to, or 20 and just does a local farmer's market, well, how much did he invest in his genetics to begin with? How stressed was the animal, even if the animal knows him, when he drove it to the slaughterhouse and the slaughterhouse doesn't have as advanced or, it's sanitary because it's still, but these little slaughterhouses are not the same as the big boys.
Right.
And meat has also a window, like the pH level and the rate that the pH drops as that animal enters rigor will determine the quality and the taste of the meat.
Sure.
So if you're just putting them up on the backhoe and doing it yourself because you think that you're like, well, the animal knows me, this is much better. Scientifically, you may not be doing the best thing for your meat.
God, people hate science, don't they?
They do. I don't, but some people do. But that to me is like that's the huge disconnect for me. And it just comes from people being fearful and being driven by fear and mistrust rather than seeking the answers for themselves, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely makes sense. Guys, Rock and Roll Denim has absolutely changed the game when it comes to the performance and style in Western jeans. Top competitors like Shad, Tim O'Connell, Shelly Morgan, you name it. Your boy right here, we're all wearing Rock and Roll Denim. Inside and outside of the arena, it gives you the flexibility you need to win, as well as looking absolutely great in your interviews, appearances, whatever it is you're doing. Even when you're just doing podcasts like me. I had a chance to go to Rock and Roll Denim's factory the other day and pick out all the pants I wanted. Here's the thing. I got to try on a bunch of their new jeans. I love the men's Revolver jeans with the reflex stretch technology because they're comfy. They're not stiff like some of the other jeans. Go check them out at rockandrolldenim.com or follow Rock and Roll Denim on Facebook and Instagram for the newest trends in Western fashion. rockandrolldenim.com. Guys, let me remind you how much we love Pendleton whiskey and how much you'll love it too. Here's the thing with Pendleton. It's not on every single shelf in the entire country. Sometimes you go to those small towns where the small rodeos are and you can't find Pendleton. That's where drizzly.com comes into play. Satisfy your inner cowboy by purchasing your bottle of Pendleton whiskey online. Buy it online at drizzly.com, put it in the trailer. Pendleton blended Canadian whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume, Pendleton Distilleries, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and please drink responsibly. Texas Saddlery is my go-to place for custom leather work this holiday season. Not only do they do custom saddles and tack, but they have some of the best silver work in the business, and of course, every hand-tooled leather product you can imagine. I love their belts. You're not going to find a better belt. They are made from 100% high-grade U.S.-raised cowhides. They're rough enough to ride the fences, classy enough for a night out on the town. So fancy, in fact, the one and only Miranda Lambert commissioned Texas Saddlery to make her custom gun holsters. Texas Saddlery is the new look of the Old West. Go to txsaddlery.com. Again, that's txsaddlery.com to shop their great holiday specials or get great ideas on corporate gifts this holiday season. And don't forget to grab one of their belts, guys. txsaddlery.com. Guys, mark your calendar booked on January 30th, 2 to 5 p.m. at XX Equine. There's going to be a meet and greet with Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. He's one of the most prominent political figures speaking right now. He's also running for governor in Texas. Again, there's going to be food. He's going to speak. Again, January 30th, 2 to 5 p.m. at XX Equine. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that's going to be said, come check it out. So, next question. Mm-hmm. You're on a mission to buy one steak and one steak only. Let's say it's a ribeye.
Yep.
Where are you buying it?
I mean,
somewhere accessible for everybody.
Well, no one in Fort Worth's going to like this because I'm probably going to buy it at HEB.
Yeah.
HEB has an amazing, amazing meat program, and hopefully y'all will be getting one here soon.
HEB is awesome. I'm like from San Antonio. So,
you know.
So like HEB is the shit.
Yeah.
It's up here it's like, because I've lived up here for like 12 years.
Yeah.
It's like, no one's the same.
Yeah. Y'all don't know. Would you say that most of your audience is Fort Worth based?
No, I mean, our audience
all over.
It's the whole United States,
right.
But if you were to segregate it, it's the state of Texas. I don't think you could even you could pocket it, but it's the state of Texas would be the biggest.
I personally would be hesitant about buying at and I know this is going to sound horrible, but I'm just going for the best quality that I can get, right? I would be hesitant going to a farmer's market because I don't know their practices, if they age the animal, if it was an older animal. Like, I don't know much about it. So from the scientific perspective, I'm flying blind. And they also have a duty to sell the meat no matter what happens because they're really small. They have to sell it, right? They have to beat
their bottom line because, they don't have
and they're probably not getting it graded. So they're probably trying to get you, because grading is really expensive because you have to pay that USDA grader to be there.
Sure.
So if you're a small holder, you probably can't afford that. So you're going to find another platform to use, which is going to be either locavore or health. Right. Like buy local, know where it comes from, perpetuate that myth that,
that's a thing. Exactly.
Or that it's healthier. So I would try and order maybe from somewhere online that I knew had really reputable stuff. Or I was familiar with, their cattle. There's a lot of like American Wagyu that's pretty impressive at the moment. But my ultimate steak sorry, let me start again, because now you're challenging me. Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't order online because it's got to come frozen. And when you freeze meat, you always run the risk of damaging the cells as it defrosts. So I think that fresh steak always cooks best. So I would go to the grocery store. I would try and or a reputable butcher. I would try and have it be a fresh steak. And I would try and have an upper choice, either ribeye or I love top sirloin. It's super, super underrated. I never order tenderloin.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't think it tastes very beefy.
Yeah, I don't ever order a filet at a restaurant.
Yeah,
I would never order one.
Most like hardcore beef nerds are think that filet is like the gateway steak. It's kind of like the steak for people who don't love flavor that much, but they're
exactly.
like, look at me with my tender steak. So
Like, I don't want to cut my steak with a fork. That's not a win for me.
yeah, it's not meant to be a marshmallow. It's beef. So yeah, I would try and find a really great grocery store, and I'd pick Upper Choice because that's my personal preference in terms of like I want my beef to have a little chew to it. Same thing as not liking the tenderloin. Like I want that good like steak bite, like I'm chewing steak. I'm not, that's why I don't really like sous vide either.
No.
It's a texture thing.
I don't want to boil a steak in a bag. It's weird. Yeah, my wife tried to get us to buy one. I was like,
MREs.
there's 0% chance that I'm buying something. I'm not boiling a steak in a bag.
Have you ever tried it though?
No.
Okay, so I feel like
Is it good?
It makes it really, really, really tender, but then it hits an area that again is not to my palate.
That's not what I like.
want to chew. I want, and again, I'm not talking about like rubber here, but I want to know that I'm eating steak.
Yeah.
Not fish.
But I'm also that person that some people would find gross because if I go to a steakhouse and I order a $60 ribeye, there's not going to be any fat left on the plate.
No, that's
The whole
that's
steak's
the flavor.
going down.
Good for you.
And my wife's like, that's so gross. How do you eat that? I was like, because that's the most tasty piece of the whole cow.
100%.
Yeah, you don't know nothing.
Exactly.
Go eat your salmon, lady.
Yeah, please. By the way, salmon's really fatty.
It's really fatty.
It's just not in big clumps, but
Yeah.
you can just quietly sit there and watch her and judge her.
No, especially
knowing
the
that she's
salmon you
eating.
get from a restaurant because it's all going to be farm raised. You want to talk about omega-6s to omega-3s, eat a freaking salmon.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
dirty fish. So back to the sirloin thing because I don't like sirloin because it's super lean and I don't know how do you cook a sirloin to make it good. So how do you cook a sirloin to make it taste
Exactly how
really
you were
good?
talking about.
The same way?
So sirloin is a cut that I would add oil to the pan because it doesn't have enough to come out of it.
Sure.
But I love it grilled. Like
Really?
a top sirloin steak.
Yeah.
Not a sirloin, a top sirloin.
Yeah.
Right?
It's kind of hard to find though, right?
No.
Top sirloin? No?
It's pretty easy. There's a cut called a picanha, which is the top sirloin cap.
Yeah.
Which is really
picanha's
good too.
Because it has that big fat ring on the side.
Yep.
That's good
It's
stuff.
got a fat cap over the whole thing. That's the one that you see that's shaped like a C shape at like the Texas de Brazil style restaurants. So that's really good. I also really love all the skirt steaks. So outside skirt, bavette, flat irons, like any of those good thin cuts. I mean, flat iron's not a skirt just because I know. See, I always have to watch what I say because someone someday is going to be listening to this and be like, she said that was a skirt steak. She doesn't know what she's talking about because,
Yep.
women have to work way harder to prove themselves, but that's a whole other podcast.
You really do, and it's a shame because like you're way smarter than any of the men I've talked to about beef. So you deserve to be speaking on this.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to have been given a platform. It's been a really good chat so far.
It has, yeah. It's really good for me because it's only selfish for me. Like I actually don't care what anybody gets from this but me because I'm going to take this right home.
Okay, so what have you gotten out of this?
I mean,
you
I've learned
think?
a lot because I was so fixated on the idea of you got to eat grass fed, and then you kind of challenged me on that whole thing, and I'm open to that because I will never. I'm like a stoic type person, or try to be, because I think that's what we should all strive to be, students of everybody, because no matter what, somebody in this room knows something that I don't, you don't. Like we could learn from everybody, and for damn sure you came here knowing way more than me. But I'm a student of this because I like to eat good food, and I don't think I need to spend $35 on a 1 pound New York strip grass fed. I think I can spend half that and get the same nutritional value. Because I started, and the only reason I like the carnivore diet, and I like that you don't like it. I find that to be really fascinating because it's such a fucking same thing as the vegans.
It's not that I don't like it. It's that I also don't give a shit about keto. I don't care about.
No, I don't care
that.
about any of that.
Like there'll be times where I'm like, oh, it's time to watch the carbs and butter for about 2 weeks to just slim it down a bit.
Yeah, that's kind of where
But I just
I'm
don't.
at.
There's a juxtaposition for me in you can't be on a diet and enjoy eating food for food's sake, because the second that you limit something out of your diet for that, you're not like I love going to a restaurant being like, what's the chef going to put together? What flavors are they going to put together? This is so interesting. Like, whoa, I get to try this random ingredient that I've never had before.
It's the same for us. We like, and we have such a great food culture in Dallas Fort Worth.
Yes.
Like it's amazing. And there's so many good steakhouses. Like if you go to Dallas, you go to, she's scoffing at me. You live in Weatherford. All you know is the cheap sushi in the one cafe. Or you're in Brock. It's even worse.
Take that?
She will. Yeah.
Oh, they have an HEB though, so.
Well, they don't have that here, but I do like HEB too. But like you can go, and we spend like a mortgage a month on going to restaurants. So Like that's one of our like our
keeps
things
you happy
we
though,
like.
right?
It does.
Yeah.
But like you go to Dallas and you go to a place like there's a steakhouse called Knife, and I think
Knife is one of my
I
favorites.
think they're the best steakhouse in this Metroplex personally. But
I'll take that.
Nick and Sam's is good, and there's a bunch of them that are good. But
see, I like going like in Fort Worth. I'll eat steak at Clay Pigeon. Because Marcus, you can order the spinalis, so the ribeye cap off menu special. He's gonna hate that I'm saying this because
no, I gotta write this down because I've not been there.
Yeah. It's killer.
Yeah.
It's great. Knife is incredible. John Tesar has a dry aging program in house. It's very impressive and does a lot of work with that. And there's a lot of good, but that's the thing. Like it's a whole
lifestyle.
Yeah. Like people don't rodeo because they like spending tons of money on it. It's because they love it.
Yep.
Right.
Same concept.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're doing high end steaks, it's about the same cost as rodeo if you break it down on a monthly basis. But,
Yeah,
because I've done
pretty
both, so I can compare the two. But so for me, like, and I won't talk too much about the carnivore thing, but when I found out about it, I was like, this is the perfect thing for me. I don't like vegetables, and he's telling me that vegetables are not good for you. This is great. I'm in. Because like 90% of what I eat's beef, and everybody around me is telling me that my heart's gonna burst because I eat 3 or 4, sometimes 5 steaks a week, and I got people like, you're gonna die. And then we got these carnivore people telling me, no, you're actually gonna be a super athlete if you do that. Don't tell me anymore. I don't want to hear the science. I'll buy in.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to eat spinach.
I think that's why keto did so well because people were like, okay, I have to give up carbs, but I can eat all of the cheese.
Yeah.
Like, great, let's do it.
You ever see those people who get on the keto roller coaster thing, though? They always look way worse.
I've seen people who have sustained it, but I've also heard of people who have done both carnivore and keto and done it for a couple of weeks. And then they'll be like, fuck it, I'm having a pizza and beer night. Sorry if you have to beep these out.
No, we say fuck all the time.
Great.
So
I'm
we had
Australian.
another
It's
Australian
what
on
I'm
here. His
supposed to
name's
do.
Clinton Anderson.
See?
And every word he says is fuck.
Yeah, it's what we do.
Yeah.
At least I haven't dropped any C-bombs. But they...
You could also drop that.
I'm probably not going to, though. But
shouldn't,
thank you.
But you can.
Thank you.
This has an explicit rating on Apple, so it's
I can't even remember what I was talking about now because we just tangented so hard.
I know.
But it'll come to me. But I see them and they're like, fuck it, I'll have a beer and pizza night. And then they get gout because their diet was so extreme that when they changed it for that one cheat day, it like ruined their system.
It really does. And
so that concerns me.
It screws with you because if you actually try to do a real carnivore diet, because I've done it, you feel fucking fantastic.
That's
like,
interesting.
You really do. I mean, at least I did because I have like a little bit of psoriasis and some shit like that.
Yeah.
A sensitive stomach. And don't get me wrong, like I freaking love some pizza.
Yeah.
I can eat 6 or 7 quarts of ice cream in one sitting and let everyone judge me and be okay with that.
Yeah.
But I decided to try this just because, well, the guy you were talking about in Austin talked about it several years ago. And I was like, wow, that sounds really good because I'm getting judged for this. So I did it. And I did it because they were talking about athletic performance, and I'm really into that.
Yeah.
And shit you not, yeah, that's a real thing. Like all the inflammation leaves your body, but it's not necessarily from the beef, just because you're putting nothing in your body.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, don't you think it's just because you're cutting out refined foods?
Oh, absolutely.
It has nothing to do with the carnivore diet.
No, it doesn't. It's just the simplest and like easiest way because if you have issues, if you go to the right nutritionist, they're going to put you on an elimination diet where you slowly taper things down to try to isolate what it is that bothers you. The carnivore diet just like take everything out but beef and salt. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like that's the caveman version or the dumbed down version of like trying to fix your issues. But it works. I mean, the inflammation leaves your body. Like if you're into like working out and stuff, you get really shredded really fast. You know, and the other thing you don't realize is, well, you're increasing your protein like 100%. So, of course, your muscles are going to tighten up and things like that because you're eating 300, 400 grams of protein instead of 80 like everybody else does.
Yeah.
So, it's not as linear
and what the fat serves instead of the carbs in terms of something to burn?
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you do kind of like a modified carnivore diet, which is kind of what I do, and I don't do it because I'm woo-woo into the science all that much. A little bit. I find it interesting. But it's just because that's actually the way I like to eat. Like I like to have beef be my main source of calories. And then I'll eat some rice and I like fruit.
Yeah.
Fuck kale. I'm not going to eat kale. I'm not going to eat an onion. Like there's a reason it smells like shit. It's probably shouldn't eat it.
Dude, onions are delicious.
Some people like them. For me, onions taste like dog shit.
Even when they're cooked?
Yeah. Like I don't mind like that flavor of onion, but the onion itself, if I get that crunch, I'm doing that.
So what I'm also more interested about is how much dog shit you've eaten.
Actual dog shit?
Yeah.
Do you want the real answer? So not dog shit, because I've only had one dog really that was mine. Not a huge dog person. I like my dog, but it's like that shedding shit. No thanks. It's a lot of work. But horse shit, accidentally eating some horse shit.
Okay.
Not by choice, but bucked off.
So you're
landed
just
in
like
horse shit.
extrapolating that that's probably what dog shit would taste like?
I'm going to assume dog shit probably tastes worse.
Okay.
But I'm going to just base it on the fact that I got bucked off. Screaming, boom, horse shit in my mouth. Yeah, it was like the Mighty Ducks where they fed the dude dog shit. I don't know if you saw that movie. Whatever.
No, but did you ever see the Back to the Future movies?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well,
Same
doesn't he
thing.
end up with a mouthful of manure?
He does. Yeah, he gets same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, not pleasant flavor. Never will forget it. But yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
Bet
kale-
you're having a flashback right now, huh?
Yeah, but like green leaves, like basically that's unprocessed horse shit.
Yeah.
So we're just eating horse shit before it's horse shit. That's my thought.
There you go. I don't actually hate salad.
Really?
Kale is not my favorite, but like there
But
are times.
Do you like the salad itself, or is it that delicious white creamy substance
No.
they dump on the salad?
No, because the Australians don't do dressing like Americans
Yeah,
do.
what
I
is
don't
the
even like
Australian
ranch
version
that much.
of dressing? What do they eat?
We would do like a light vinaigrette maybe,
Really?
but yeah, like I just like the texture and the crunch and the flavor, and
I
like
get it.
love eating carrot sticks and stuff like that.
I do like carrots, and I do like arugula. Arugula's got a nice
See, that's
taste.
weird, but you like the peppery stuff.
Yeah, but not kale, because kale tastes like a shitty, minty weirdness.
Do you
I
like
don't know.
spinach?
If it's cream spinach at a steakhouse, sure.
Yes,
But spinach
well,
itself, it's like
there you
it
go.
feels like you have to do it for some reason.
Yeah.
But you really don't.
Yeah, you don't, just eat a mushroom
Yeah, eat
or a steak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just don't eat the wrong mushroom, because this shit gets way weird if you eat the wrong mushroom. So wait, so last thing,
Yeah.
and then I know you've got to go teach the world about this stuff or learn. I thought Riley said you had a conference, or is it a class?
I'm teaching a class.
You're teaching a class.
Yes.
Of course you are. You're freaking brilliant on this stuff. There's nothing you can learn. You have to teach. But in Australia, because you said the food culture is so different, like what is the beef culture? Is there one? Like what is food like down there? I've never been there.
Yeah, Australia is one of the biggest beef exporters in give actually. Do you want to know a fun fact?
Yes.
Do you want to know do you want to know who's in the top 5? Give me who you think are the top like 3 to 5 beef producers in the world?
I'm gonna say Australia, U.S.
Brazil's a big one.
Definitely Brazil, and then I'm gonna say something obscure like I don't know, Germany.
Yeah. Germany's not so much.
Yeah.
Uruguay does a lot of beef too. But one of the biggest beef producers in the world is India, which usually stumps
That's
people.
ironic.
Right. And that's again, I'm telling you more about like,
Yeah.
you want to talk about sustainability? It's not the U.S. system, but it is
Yeah.
the 4th largest producer of beef in the world in India. And you can imagine how their systems are, right?
Oh God! I mean, you're talking about one that like the capital of dysentery for the whole entire planet.
Yeah. So anyway, I like all that is just completely fascinating to me.
That is really strange. I would have never thought India, just because you think India, you think, well, they worship them.
Exactly.
That's
That's why
weird.
people don't think about it. So beef. So the biggest difference is, and this is if I could change one thing, it would be this: Australia, the entire population of Australia is about the same size of Texas, and we don't have, because we haven't needed to, the same food systems that you guys do, because we don't have as many people to feed. So on the whole, the food is much cleaner. The portion sizes are smaller, and there's not as much. I say cleaner, that we haven't had to put as many preservatives in things, because we're not trying to like make it last during a trucking shipment from East Coast to West Coast or
Sure.
whatever. It's much more locavore. I mean, we still have imported stuff. We have a lot of grass-fed beef because we have a lot of good grass.
Sure.
So in the same way as Maine, it just depends, right? Like we don't have tremendous quality grass in Texas. That's why it's harder to find grass-fed product, and it's more expensive. But you can get grass-fed stuff out of Australia that looks like it's beyond prime.
Really?
Yeah, because they're allowed to sit on that grass, and it's really, they get the clover, they get like really good nutrition out of it. New Zealand too, Ireland.
Yeah, New Zealand is high in steaks for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but it's just cleaner. Like not everything comes with dressing all the way over it. There's not a lot of
Makes sense.
There's not sugar in all the bread like there is here. It's just different.
Yeah,
So the
people are
hardest
healthier
thing-
in Australia, it seems like, by
I'd
and
say
large.
so. I mean, we have some pretty shitty foods as well. Don't get me wrong.
But they probably didn't originate there. They came from here, likely.
yeah, or
the
well,
idea of them
Britain
did.
has some responsibility here as well with a lot of the fried shit that they.
Well, they're responsible for a lot of the things in Australia.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, that's a whole nother historical conversation. But yeah, I mean, I'm really happy you came, and I learned so much, and I can't wait to implement some of the things you said. And yeah, I'm gonna check you out and follow everything you do, because I think you're a pretty good ambassador for what you're doing, and I like that you're a little rough on the edges, around the edges. You're like, fuck, and I want to say the C word, I can't, but fuck the carnivores and fuck Joe Rogan. You basically said
I didn't.
that.
No, I didn't. You
No,
said
you
it.
didn't. I did. But
Yeah.
then I put that on you, and so now you're gonna get hate on it because I put it on you, even though it's not true. It's just like every other form of media. I didn't tell the truth.
Well, this has actually been super awesome. I
Yeah.
usually feel like I'm just bombarded with the same questions of like, how do I cook the best brisket? And this has been really interesting, and I hope your listeners got something out of it as well. But I
Definitely.
really had a great time, so I
I'm
appreciate
glad you
it.
came. You want to know the key to actually having a podcast where the guest has fun? You have to suffer from severe ADD.
Is that what it is?
That's what works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's the secret.
There it is. Don't let anybody else
Lay
know.
off the Adderall, everyone.
Yeah, put it down. Put down the Prozac, mommy. Yeah, we'll be good. Well, you enjoy the rest of your time in Fort Worth, and thank
you.
you so much for coming.
You got it.
This has been The Gauge, hosted by me, Chance Conrado, produced and edited by our guy Ty Yeager. Shout out to the executive producers Dustin Pointer and Cody Denton. Marketing and content produced by Riley Chone. Make sure to rate and review this podcast, as well as follow The Gauge on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure to subscribe to The Gauge wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys next time.